commonly linked to prose, poetry, or the dramatic arts. The art of satire uses a variety of literary and rhetorical devices to expose the perceived failings or shortcomings of individuals, institutions, or social groups. By way of the full spectrum of literary constructs and bit players, a satirist may employ invective, sarcasm, burlesque, irony, mockery, teasing, parody, exaggeration, understatement, or stereotype, all to hold his or her predetermined target up to extreme ridicule and scorn. Going there, Black visual satire proposes that the art of satire not only has a long-standing and infamous place in the world, but that it also has a distinctly African-American lineage and presence in modern and contemporary visual art. The challenge of developing a set of definitions for satire is itself formidable, but locating this genre in a Black American tradition of visual, verbal, and performative practices raises the intellectual stakes and poses multiple questions. One of those questions is the notion of creative risk and how satire puts the artist and the artwork's audience in an antagonistic relationship, a situation that rather than fostering comprehension and certainty, fuels the effrontery and confusion for which satirical works are notorious. Another issue this study investigates is the logic and rationale behind deploying stereotypic and racist reference in Black satirical art, and whether this strategy achieves the artistic objectives of its creators. Finally, the paradigms that satire invariably brings to the surface, artist and audience, words and images, comedy and crisis, and mockery and valor, to name a few, complicate a straightforward understanding of this form of discourse. The devices of the satirist, unflattering portraiture, strange accounts and occurrences, fictional sojourns, startling comparisons and juxtapositions, fables in which animals enact human deeds, word games, rhetorical debates, pertinent aphorisms, and hypercritical orations, all become the vehicles for attack and for bringing to the fore appeals to virtue. The satirical spirit infiltrates virtually all discursive practices, and thus it is difficult to separate this particular impulse and mark its literal boundaries. From the comedic to the tragic, satire tugs on an audience's understandings and vague moral underpinnings, with an insistence and militancy on par with manifestos, even curses. Although firmly ensconced in literature, satire and its constantly changing combustible aspects may be expressed more profoundly in the visual arts. Utilizing caricature and its propensity for visual shorthand, anatomical distortions, narrative hyperbole, and symbolism, artists since antiquity have produced striking and often incisive commentaries on the peoples and times in which they lived. When a critic decides to satirize someone or something, the idea of taking one's particular skills for wit and reprimand to an extraordinary point of execution is called going there. This euphemism suggests a trek of sorts, a journey, no matter how long or short, towards a target and its expansive ruination. And it hopefully doesn't take too long or too much deciphering for that critic's audience or community to realize what has just transpired, a figural pathway or a gauntlet. Through insinuation, analogies, comparisons, exaggerations, and subtleties, to bring into the light of day the offenses and failures of an antagonist or a concern. Satire is everywhere. Most would agree that it's certainly present in humanity's cultural bloodstream, but one still has to know what one is experiencing is satire in order to properly identify it. And one also has to know where to find it. For example, in an awkward yet knowing reply to balderdash, in a glibly delivered counterpoint, in the extemporized silences following ad nauseum hot air, in a carefully orchestrated closed mouth smile, out of the know-nothing mouths of know-it-alls, in the wry cultural assessments of 21st century skeptics, in a raised eyebrow, and in an inordinate amount of modern and contemporary art.